Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're about to get started very shortly, and we're going to be doing things a little bit different this time. We love to experiment with different things. And so, as you're coming in, as usual, we'd love to get to know you a little better. Please, if you can, in the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from. And we're also going to kick it off with just a little bit more of engagement. So, Tom, why don't you launch the poll and I'll kind of go over. So, this, don't worry, this webinar is about writing requirements. That said, we are still interested in learning a little bit more about how the product community is looking to use AI in 2025. So we are asking while we're waiting for people, if you can, this is a select all, just let us know if you are planning to include AI in your product or if you have absolutely zero AI plans. Tom, I'm going to be very, very surprised if a lot of people choose that one.
Well, I see we have some Texans here already. Another
Yay.
person from Austin. Jeff, welcome.
That's great. So yeah, and by the way, if you're joining us on LinkedIn Live, feel free to, I know you don't necessarily have the same poll functionality that the folks joining us on Zoom are, but feel free to also write in where you're dialing in from. And also, if you want to comment on our live stream with your AI plans, we'll take that too. But look at that. We have maybe a Tom fan in the audience as well from Robert.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Woody, good to see you. Thank you for joining. He and I just had coffee yesterday, so
Oh, nice. Okay, so no pressure, Tom.
no
Uh,
pressure.
all right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And certainly I love to see that we always see just such a variety of people. I see some people calling in from Canada, from Michigan, from all sorts of states. And of course, great to see a lot of people chiming in from Texas as well. Okay, I think we can close out the poll and kick it off.
Okay. There we go. Got the results sharing. So,
Very nice. So yeah, we're gonna take that in, but interesting that there are quite a few of you, 60% that use AI daily in product work. And that's a pretty good percentage. I'd expect that to increase over the next year.
yeah, I applaud everyone who is doing it daily because I have to admit, I hadn't been doing it daily. And then all of a sudden started doing it and I was like, wow, I need to do this every day and I do now. So it is a big help.
And very relevant for our discussion today, which is going to be about how to write requirements that truly drive outcomes. Now, it's not going to be about having chat or an LLM write requirements for you if that's what you're hoping for. Because the real work, the real product work that drives great requirements writing happens to be also great product management work. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, when Tom and I discussed the story or what we're going to be presenting today, just know that there is going to be a lot of great product management fundamentals thrown at you. Please chime in, ask questions, comments. We want this to be as engaging and interactive as possible. But first, a little bit about us. So my name, of course, is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of Productside. I've recently moved to Austin, Texas. So you have our Austin-based crew here. And Tom, why don't you quickly introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, Tom Evans. I've been a trainer consultant with Productside for almost 15 years. And I've been here in Austin the whole time and love living here in Austin and looking forward to sharing this webinar with you.
Hey, 15 years coming up this month, I think.
Yeah.
Well, great. So for those of you joining, I do hope that you know a bit about Productside, but in case you were sharing with a friend who's not familiar with us, who we are is truly an outcome-driven product partner. We like to say that we are here not to show you just how to do product management, but show you the journey because it truly is a journey for our clients. And the reason why teams choose to work with us is because we offer we come in knowing that it takes a journey, it takes partnership, and it requires us to be really flexible. So we offer a complete suite of solutions from advisory work as well as training programs that we then tailor to the context for our clients to make it absolutely relevant to their day-to-day, their industry. And all of them are led by, we love this term, invested experts, people like Tom. They don't do the job to just check a box. They really want to see change for our clients, and that's why they are truly invested. Oh, Jeff. Well, we're sorry to see you go, but you can watch this later. That's usually the first question that we get, is can I watch this webinar later? Now we don't necessarily share the slides, but you will get a link to view this recording after it has ended. And certainly connect with us and continue to engage with us at Productside. All of our webinars, past webinars, are also available for streaming on our website.
And we want to ask questions as we go through. So don't wait till the very end. If a question comes up, make sure to ask that question when it comes up at the moment. And you can use the Q&A capability of Zoom
Right.
to be able to ask those questions. Yep.
So I'll be monitoring. I think we're also going to be monitoring on LinkedIn, but yes, so please submit your questions and engagement in the chat function or the Q&A. What we like to do, I know Tom and I like to do this, is bring questions that are relevant as they come along. But of course, if you do ask a question that's not quite relevant, we do leave time at the end for Q&A. So we will make sure to try to get to as many of them as possible. And for those of you who have not yet connected with us on LinkedIn, we have one of the biggest product management communities. The QR code can take you there, but I know we also pasted the link for you in chat. And this is a great community for you to share best practices, connect with peers. And really, I do see posts every single day. So people sharing their thoughts and also chiming in on potential new product launches. So pretty great network here. And now we're off to the quite full agenda. Tom, why don't you kick it off?
Absolutely. So, just real quick, we're going to be focusing on requirements, of course, and we're going to first talk about why good requirements are important and what is the impact if you don't have good requirements. We're going to describe three of the key principles that help drive us toward being able to deliver good requirements for our other stakeholders in the organization. And the last thing we're going to do is talk just briefly about how do I manage requirements in an agile environment? Because some of us may be more accustomed to a traditional waterfall type approach, but agile requires you to think a little bit differently in terms of when those requirements are done, when are they validated, when are they ready for product development. So we want to leave you some thoughts around that. So as we get into this first part, we do have another poll. And what we want to do is to ask you what kinds of information do you or your product managers, if you're not a product management, include in requirements. And this is a multiple select, so you can should be able to select more than one of these. So let's see what everybody puts in there.
Yeah, and I do hope that I do see most people select more than one of these, because we would be pretty much in trouble if it's, well, I mean, some of them are probably going to be a little bit better, but you definitely need a more holistic picture, right, Tom?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we're just going to leave it open for a little bit longer as you kind of fill it out. But of course, customer goals and outcomes, the journeys, the problem descriptions. There's also some technical aspects. Those are pretty common with requirements. And also, I'm glad to see here a selection for the standards for UX and as well as performance and security. I
Mm-hmm.
remember talking, Tom, to an engineering manager where this sometimes gets missed by product management. And so this one is, I'm going to be curious to see how many fill that one out.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and close it here? And I'm going to share those results. And we have 98% of you talking about the customer goals and outcomes, and then 86 talking about the customer journey or problem description. And I love what Zach put into the chat is my biggest goal in sharing requirements is to define the job to be done or the problem statement. And absolutely. And that's why I'm thrilled to see so many people responding with that, those first two responses, because it's too easy for us to jump into getting into the technical details or solutions, especially if we come from a technical background to do that. And I'm not saying those aren't important, but if we think about what we need to do as a product manager, I love to see that so many responded with those first two answers.
I don't think I've ever seen an 88% on an answer.
I don't think so either. So
That's great.
that is excellent. So, well, thank you for the participation in that. So let's talk about what happens when we don't have good requirements. And these are just some examples that are mostly publicly known about requirement mistakes that created a lot of publicity in a bad way. And so some of it, maybe remember back some years ago, the Mars Climate Orbiter, because one group was using metric and the other was using, I guess we call it standard or British units, whatever we want is there was a lack of communications and it caused that to big investment to disintegrate. Target, when they tried to enter the Canadian market, they missed out a lot of requirements in terms of implementing within their systems around the local taxes and other regulatory type requirements, and ended up completely failing with that and not being able to sustain themselves in the Canadian market. I remember healthcare.gov when that was first launched, and so many bugs and issues that went on with that. And I was telling Rena, I actually dressed up for Halloween that year as healthcare.gov. Uh, I think maybe the last time I dressed up for Halloween, but that definitely got some publicity. I think Rena, you definitely remember the Samsung smartphones catching on fire.
Yeah, I'm almost tempted now, Tom, for this year for Halloween, figuring out what is the biggest product failure in dressing up. That's such a good idea.
And even a great company like Apple, when they first launched their Apple Maps, had a number of errors and inaccuracies. And I sure thought I corrected that lunch to launch, but somewhere or the other it came back as launch again or lunch, but it was at launch, not at lunch. So let's talk about requirements. And I know there's a lot of focus around requirements on how do you write them in a very specific way. And I think that's all good to be able to focus on that. But what's really important is what Jeff Patton says in this quote. And this is a quote that I probably read 12 years ago or so. And it's been made such an impression on me that it's something that I communicate all the time is that requirements aren't just about the specs, but they're about creating a shared understanding with other stakeholders in the organization, and especially those who are going to be working with you to build the product. And so, the product development team, engineering, design, or user experience, QA, especially those, really need to have that shared understanding on why we're building this, and starting to move into defining that what. And that just is such a has rung such a note on me that I really emphasize that point. It's not about writing the requirement and meeting a perfect format for it. It's about creating understanding. And we'll talk about some tools there that help guide us to create understanding. These are probably the extreme and bad requirements example, but believe it or not, these are things that have actually been done. Okay. Add a user profile page, build a dashboard for the sales team. And, we don't put a lot of information in there. I had a company that I worked for, and this was before I joined the organization as their first product manager, but the CEO would walk past the developer and say, you know what, you ought to do this to the product. And it was about this level of description. And then they were expected to be able to understand and know exactly what to do with that. And so they were so glad when I came and joined in because that helped them avoid that pressure of trying to figure out well, what should I really be building? And was that a requirement that I really need to do, or was that just a suggestion? And so there was a lot of uncertainty created when we build bad requirements. So, what causes bad requirements? There are, some things here, but a big one of it, and this is what you're going to see us talking a lot about, is where is our focus? Are we talking about focusing on the what and the how? And have we missed out in terms of talking about the why and the who? And that really starts to get into these other two ones around the context. So either we don't have any context that we're communicating and we're just telling, here's what you ought to build. And even if we do have that context, we make an assumption that others in the organization truly understand that context. And then there's that rush to solution. And I know that as I've worked with customers, that is something that happens so often is like, well, let's figure out the solution without taking the time to understand the context and make sure everybody has that shared understanding of the need or the problem or the job to be done that the customer is trying to achieve. And I think, as you see in most of the examples that we shared, there's a lot of subjective, vague, or ambiguous language. And we'll talk a little bit about how to address that. So that's not necessarily going to be the main focus of what we want to talk to, but some of the techniques that we will discuss will help us work through um, resolving issues such as the subjective, vague, or ambiguous type language. So, what happens when we don't have good requirements? Well, our teams aren't aligned. We end up doing a lot of rework, which means that we miss our goals. We create frustration with our internal stakeholders and customers. And ultimately, as we showed in the examples, that can lead to some financial losses and sometimes some very significant financial losses.
So Tom,
So go ahead. Yeah.
before you get there, I'm curious because I hear it a lot, the whole rush to solution. It's actually pretty bad. It's often worse than that in some companies where there's just this focus on just the output delivery, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And so let's just get there. And how can maybe we can guide the conversation of what to do in that situation, given that these impacts, these are real tangible impacts that truly happen on product teams. In fact, a lot of the companies we work with come to us as a result of financial losses from rushing to solutions without the context. So
Mhm.
is there something that you can maybe advise product managers listening in? If you're in this situation, here's how to have that conversation with those stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk first about we'll move into some of the first slides and then I'll reflect back on it.
Mhm.
But as we go through the first couple of principles, those are the principles of talking about the why and the who and the why is critical. Is instead of them just sending you a requirement, be inquisitive. Want to do some conversations and tell me a little bit more about it. Who's this targeted for? Because if you understand that and what the goal of accomplishing that is, that's going to help you significantly in really making sure the right requirements are done. And I know that I dealt with a client last year where they were operating in that model, and the head of who was given a lot of the requirements felt like they were delivering sufficient requirements. But in reality, as we talked to the product managers, they're going, we don't understand any of the context around it. Well, you have to have that conversation and be willing to use some of these techniques that we're talking about to ask those conversations.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And that's really what gets into here is starting with, the who and the why. Make sure that that is clearly understood. Because if you don't understand that as the product manager, you definitely aren't going to communicate that to other stakeholders. And you're not going to be able to, you're not going to have confidence that you're going to deliver the right solution for that. Make sure we're focused on outcomes. And I'll talk more about why that outcome focus is so important. And then make sure that we clearly are able to identify and communicate that intended user behavior. Because ultimately, it's about what is it the user wants to be able to accomplish. Now, I have four other rules down here. And all of these are important. I do not want to de-emphasize the importance of these, but if I don't have these first three well executed, whatever I write and using these other four rules aren't going to matter. So I've got to really make sure that I get these first three rules and nail those down. So that's really what we're going to talk about here throughout the rest of this webinar. So let's talk about the who and the why. And this is one of the ways I love to help us start focusing on creating that understanding. So who is having the problem? Who is the persona? Yes, I want to understand it at a customer level, but ultimately there's a persona or multiple personas who have that problem, have that challenge, have that need, and we needed to be able to identify who that persona is. Going back to what Zach said, what job are they trying to accomplish? What's getting in the way of that job? So what is the problem that they're running into? And what is their desired outcome? What is their goal of what they want to really be able to achieve? And if I can create my understanding around that and then start sharing that understanding with the other stakeholders, you're going to go a long ways toward having much better requirements. I hope that most of us are familiar with the concept around personas. And I'm going to guess that most of us know about personas and maybe we've used them, but I've also run into organizations, while they know about it, don't necessarily consistently use it. And here's what I really like about personas is it I don't want to say forces you, but it actually encourages everybody to keep a focus on the persona and talk about the customer in any conversations that come up. I remember visiting one company, and as I walked along, we're sitting in the conference room. Actually, they had their personas up there on the conference room wall. And if you look at companies like Amazon, one of the things Jeff Bezos, I think, has really done well to help guide that success is always getting the conversation to come back to the customer. So having that understanding of the persona is critical as a starting point. The next thing then is understanding that job to be done. What is it that they're trying to accomplish? And too often, what we do is we get into the job that we think the product needs to be doing, but we're not really thinking about ultimately what is it they're trying to do. And so I'll say this real quickly here, but my example is around ironing shirts. And so for years, I talked about being able to iron shirts in hotels. Well, that wasn't ultimately the job I was trying to do. I kept framing it at a assumed solution level, but when I reframed it in terms of I want to get the wrinkles out of my shirt, now all of a sudden it opens up the possibility of other solutions. And so that's what we need to do is sometimes get out of our solution thing and elevate it up to ultimately what are we trying to accomplish as a functional job, but also remember that any of your personas will have some level of a social job they want to accomplish in terms of how they make themselves appear. And in the work they do, we want to avoid the frustrations. We want to avoid the angry customers that are talking to us or whatever that may be that helps us feel stronger emotionally. And so, even if you're working with B2B customers, social and emotional will play a role in it. And part of that understanding is making sure that we understand all three of these aspects, not just the functional job, but the emotional and social job.
And I see Kim already pasted in the chat, but we have a number of webinars and even a free webinar workshop. I think, Tom, you and I ran, well, you ran last year. If you're interested in doing more of these kinds of jobs to be done type workshops, do let us know. We're always interested in hearing from our audience if that's useful to you, because I know that's something that Tom really loves to do anyway.
I love jobs to be done. And I'm glad Zach mentioned it because that to me, for once I finally understood it, it was a game changer in terms of my ability to talk around really a customer understanding. So one of the other things that we want to know is where does our customer, as they're doing this job, what are their desired outcomes? And if you think about any job that we're doing, we will have multiple outcomes that we want to be able to accomplish in terms of either improving on something or doing more of, or doing things increase. I'm going to use decrease, increase, and decrease. So we want to increase, we want to improve, and that improve may be expressed as either an increase or a decrease. It really comes down to those two options. So, what is the improvement you want to get, and be able to express that in an explicit way, because that's going to, one, help create understanding, but also with this understanding of the outcome. When I'm doing my voice of the customer work, I want to be asking those questions. Okay, as you're doing this job, where are you running into challenges? Where do you want to have improvements? What are those improvements? Where are you right now? Where would be a good look like for you? And I guess that really leads us into this next slide, is the way to create that understanding is through voice of the customer, doing empathy interviews, really getting a strong understanding of our customers. And I cannot, yes, I can go to AI and ask it questions around these, and it's going to give me some ideas, but don't consider that to be your answer, because you haven't actually talked to the customer and the persona who's involved in that. So use that maybe as a starting point and help framing your voice of the customer. But we really want to make sure that we have an effective program for doing voice of the customer.
Yeah. I actually, Tom, I think we're going to go into another poll, but I actually
We are, yep.
recently spoke to a product leader, and they had a product manager come up to them and say, I want to do like with requirements, and I wanted to get this done. And the product leader had to ask, well, have you talked to a single customer? And they hadn't. So that was the opportunity to go back and do this work. And what they found out was nobody cared about whatever they were trying to get done. So saved a lot of time and certainly frustration. But now we covered a lot, and that was kind of what I was alluding to at the start of the webinar, in that in order to get the requirement is an output, right, of this great work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's certainly a lot of discovery work that needs to happen, deep customer understanding. So we're curious, given this conversation, which of these do you want to improve on more in 2025? And as we're kind of talking about some of these concepts like jobs to be done, product outcomes, these are really big concepts. And although we do expect that product managers can do it all, certainly having some practice around these practices helps. And that's why all of these are in our optimal product management course for those of you who have taken it. And for those of you who are interested, Tom, if you can go to the next slide. While we wait.
Yeah, oops, there we go. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results, and then we'll also be able to see that. But it's fairly even across there. I'm not going to say any stand out any stronger than that much stronger than the other. But I'm definitely glad to see, over 20, over 30% of everyone is saying these are areas for us to improve in 2025. And I think they're so interrelated with each other, and they're so critical to create that customer understanding.
Right. And this is the core product management work that we do talk about and focus in our optimal product management class. And I did want to bring up that, Tom, we're actually, since there are a lot of people here tuning in from Texas, we are coming back to Austin this June 17th to the 20th. Tom will be leading a class in Texas. So if you're interested in learning more, do reach out to us here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see you here in Austin, because we have a great class here. All the classes we do are great, but I always find the Austin in person one to be special for me, because I've been doing that for almost 15
That's
years.
right.
Yep. All right. The next baseline need here is to make sure that we're focused on outcomes. And so there's some research that shows us that if we have been focusing primarily on delivering output, that a lot of that output actually delivers, it doesn't deliver much positive outcome for our customers or for our business. And so if you look at this, is that 20% of what we are, oops, sorry here. Actually, I think it's supposed to be this
The other
20%.
one, it's the bright one, the one that doesn't look like the
There we
rest.
go. There we go. There's the 20%. That 20% is the part that actually delivers the outcome. So if you think about how many people hours you invest in creating new features and capabilities for the product, and the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that you spend on that, and only 20% of that delivered a strong positive outcome for your target customers. Wow. What about the rest of that? So there is 60% that does have some impact, but very little, nothing that is really significant. And then there's another 20% that may actually harm you. And so if this happens when we are focusing on output. We deliver output because that's what we're being measured on. That's what we're expecting. Those are what things that people are asking us for. But if I can start focusing on outcomes, then that starts moving me into a better position to achieve what this quote. I mentioned Jeff Patton again. Jeff Patton just has been really good at phrasing things, and I love the way he talks about it. But at the end of the day, your job is to minimize output and maximize outcome and impact. And that is absolutely what we want to do. Wouldn't your leaders in your organization be much more happier if you invest 50% of the resources in doing product development, but yet you start to see a significant increase in outcomes? I think they would be. And I think by leading with outcomes, that helps us achieve that better focus. So let's talk about outcomes. These are some definitions that we use and that we teach in our optimal product management class. And in reality, everything needs to align to a business outcome. And so anything that we deliver on an output needs to align to a business outcome. Well, what's the bridge here? Well, we have product outcomes. And when we talk about product outcomes, we talk about that being a positive result or positive impact on our customers. So by implementing a certain amount of output, we are going to deliver a positive outcome for our customers. And then if we are delivering a positive outcome for our customers, we highly expect that that is going to help contribute to our business outcomes. The challenge is too often we start over here in terms of thinking about what the output should be. And then we try to say, well, does that have any outcome? Well, why don't I start with the outcome? So, for example, business outcome. Do I have a specific market segment we want to grow in? Do we have specific target segments where we think there's the best opportunity? Maybe I have a target segment where I have some retention issues. Those are the types of things that we should be defining early on to say, what is a business goals that we want to achieve? Now, what is it that I can help customers with that will help me be able to achieve that business outcome? What are the desired outcomes of that customer that will best impact, that'll have the greatest impact for them? Then, with that in mind, I can start to frame what the output is, what the right solution is going to be for that to achieve these outcome goals. But too often, where do we start? We start the other side.
Yeah, and I do want to say, Tom, that it's it's very common for all different kinds of stakeholders, sales, customer support. They have these issues, these problems, true problems from customers that they interact with, but they don't have all of the other context that a product manager should have. And so I like to think of it as it can, even if it's sounds like a good problem to solve, it's really just noise until you figure the rest of it out and put it into the right context. And no one else in the company is going to do that for you. And, talking directly to sales is probably also not going to help. You really need to go back to what we were talking about before. Talk to your users, talk to your customers.
Hmm. Yep. And well, one of the ways that we can help make sure that we are aligning what we're delivering with the goals of the organization is using our outcome tree. And so this is part of our playbook that is available on our website, or if you come to our training class, you can get that. But what I love about this is that it allows me to demonstrate in my discussions with other stakeholders in the organization that we are truly aligned to outcomes that are going to benefit the customer, and that those we can tell the story of that alignment of we deliver this, that's going to help us achieve this outcome for the customer, and that aligns to helping us achieve this targeted business outcome. So one of the questions you asked, Rena, was, well, how do I go if somebody is coming to me and saying, Tom, build this? Well, what can I use here now to be able to help me to understand that? And all these things that we've been talking about is, all right, which persona is having this problem? Who are we building this for? What is what is the key issue that they're running into? What is it they're trying to accomplish? What outcomes do they have that they're not able to? And I think by having those conversations, even if that's a executive in the team, as long as you approach it not in a challenging way, but I really want to understand so that I can make sure that we get the best requirements in place. That's going to help you lead those conversations. They may be a little bit hesitant early on, but I think as you start to demonstrate the value in doing that, you're going to get their buy-in.
Yeah, and something we're not really talking about today is also, I did want to share this because I think I heard this from our colleague Ryan, where if you get into these kinds of conversations, especially with executives, it's also going to be beneficial to start thinking about, well, what is the smallest, easiest test I can run to validate it,
Mhm.
and talk to them about what that could be. And, that way you can run a small experiment versus commit to a full development.
Yep, exactly. And I think the challenge that we run into in asking when we start asking questions of executives, that they're afraid that we're going to ask them to give us 2 or 3 months to go out and do some research and validate all this, and they're going, we don't have time for that. Well, what if you give me a couple days to run an experiment, or maybe a week to run an experiment? Okay, that's something that they're much more willing to bite off and invest in. All right. The last thing that we want to do is to make sure that we are talking with other stakeholders around the user behavior and being able to express it in a way that these stakeholders understand it. And one of the tools, again, I'm referencing Jeff Patton. Jeff, hopefully you're getting a little publicity from this, but is Jeff Patton did not create story mapping, but he's the one who really popularized it. And it's a way for us to use sticky notes to really walk through and I don't want to use quite the word the customer journey, but the user journey is walk through the user journey in different scenarios to be able to understand how the customer wants to be able to interact with your product. But it's not just the documenting of this. The beauty of this is that we are driving understanding, and we're driving understanding because we're having conversations. So I know early on in my product management career, I would write a set of requirements. And I thought if I write the perfect set of requirements, I can hand it to a developer and they're going to return to me exactly what I wanted them to build. Doesn't work that way. It really is those conversations. And as we sat down and started having conversations around the requirements, they had lots of questions. And I was like, well, I wrote it perfectly. No, I didn't write it perfectly because they didn't understand. And having those conversations are super valuable. And story mapping, in my mind, is one of the best ways to be able to do this. And so this is, you see over on the right-hand side, a high-level look at what a story map looks like. So we start off with a high-level view, and then we start breaking it down more and more into the specific interactions that our user wants to be able to use or accomplish. And here's one of the reasons this is so valuable is that as I've worked with companies, I've run into several situations where product managers were frustrated. They were like, if I don't describe the solution in perfect detail, I don't get what I want with it. And I say, well, do the product developers or your engineers understand how the product is being used? And they're like, well, probably not. And so I encourage them to use the story map as a way to help create that common understanding. Because if all I'm doing as a product developer is reading a Jira ticket or a user story, and I don't see where it fits into the big picture, then this is I'm not creating understanding. And so I want them to understand where that requirement fits into the big picture. And the story map is one way for us to be able to do that. And this is, these are conversations, not just, you can have these conversations with your customers as you're doing VOC. If you have time to do this, you can have this with executive teams so that they understand why you're doing what you're doing, but definitely using this in terms of the interacting with your product development team. And it's through these conversations that they're going to create understanding. They're going to identify those things that are not well specified, not well written out, where there's ambiguity or not a clear understanding around it. And that is the most valuable thing. It's not the writing of the requirement; it's creating that understanding that becomes so valuable. So when we do these, we always start at the high level. And what I have learned is that it really helps if I just start and I select one persona. I don't want to start off with 3 personas or 4 personas, though eventually I'll get there, but start with one persona and then identify what that high level flow looks like for them. So we start looking at what are the first high level activities they need to do? What are the second level, or what is the second activity? And in most cases, you can follow a linear flow in terms of that activity. And now we start breaking it down into specific steps. And now we break it down even into more detail that ultimately starts to form your user story. So you're not going to write a full user story at this point, but you're going to at least capture that thought. And through this, you're going to have those conversations. You're going to create understanding. The product developer is going to be able to say, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? Oh, where are we going to get that data from? And all these things that you thought were assumptions everybody understood are now being brought out and clarified. So we start off at the top level. And I've already talked through this, but then we start breaking out those activities, and then we go into the steps. And ultimately, we get it down into a much more detailed user story type level. And when I've done this in the work that I've done, the amount of conversations and understanding it creates is incredible. And so don't just sit down and start writing a bunch of requirements. Do a user story exercise. If you're wondering who should be involved in it, you want to have somewhere around 3 to 5. I wouldn't go over 5. I think if you have less than 3, you're not going to get the productive engagement. So this includes you as a product manager. If you have a product owner that you're working with, also, the product owner may actually be the one who's leading a big part of this, though you're definitely responsible for that. Someone from the product development team, so whoever your lead technical person is, somebody from user experience, and QA. Those would be the key people that I would be looking at wanting to engage in an exercise around story mapping. Well, we got just a few more minutes here, and we want to go into this last part about managing requirements in an agile environment. And we do have a poll here because we just want to get an understanding of what type of approach that you're taking in terms of product development. Are you waterfall? Are you agile? Are you hybrid? We just skip the customer needs and go straight to the solution. Or we don't really do any documentation of requirements at all.
Great. So while we're waiting for you all to submit your answers, I did want to just point out that in the chat, it looks like, Tom, a lot of love for the outcome tree and outcomes in general. Really great to hear that. And I did paste, now we have other content that we're going to be sharing as part of this webinar, but I did paste for everybody. If you're interested in the outcome tree, it is available as part of our full product side playbook. We, of course, release parts of that playbook for free on our website, and the product management leader pack is the one that has, I think, a lot of the outcome focused templates. So come to our website. It's under resources, tools, and templates. And please download that completely for free, and definitely let us know as you use it.
All
All right.
right. And let's say we'll give it like another 5 seconds here on the poll. So we've gotten most people participating, but still a
Great.
chance for a few more.
And again, if you have questions about these topics, how to handle different scenarios at your specific company, challenges that you personally are facing as a product manager or a product leader, please put that into Q&A or the chat so that we will get to it during Q&A.
Okay, we're going to close that poll and share the results. So most people are using Agile in some form, and I'm not surprised by the second one is we're hybrid, so it's mixed. I do find many organizations will not commit one, can't commit. Sometimes they can't commit, but they can't commit one way or the other and need to do some blended approach. And there's probably a few industries where waterfall still makes sense to do. But boy, I tell you, from my experience of working with Agile, if I can get into an Agile implementation environment, that's really the way that I want to be able to go. All right. And those that go right to the solution, hopefully you have some good takeaways here that you can take back to your organization and the work that you're are working on. So here's the part that I want to emphasize, and this goes back to our outcomes-based roadmap. And is that in the playbook that the product leader pack
This is
also?
yes, that's why I think it's this outcome tree, outcome statements, and also this roadmap and release plan.
Yeah. So this is fantastic, and this is the release plan part of it. But what I want to emphasize here is that while we know what we're working on now, and we have a high level of confidence of the features of initiatives that we want to do, we in parallel with delivering on this output or building this output, we need to be doing acts of discovery on anything that is sitting here in the next, because we need to have it refined, and at least maybe not the user story fully refined, but we need to have the concept refined enough and the high level requirement refined enough that we can start moving it into the now. And as we look out there into the future, there may be some opportunities out there that we still want to do some discovery work. And so I know it's very easy because of how much attention a product development teams needs during product development to become focused on just the delivery, on the building part of it. But we have to have time to do some upfront, do discovery of those things that are in our pipeline to do next. And this is one of the ways to look at it is thinking about one is the outcome based roadmap. So instead, remember we talked about that focused on outcomes. And so here, instead of listing a bunch of features in our roadmap, we're targeting outcomes. And now, as we get into the release plan, we have the output that we're planning to use to achieve that outcome. As I look into next, I have my desired outcomes into the future. And then I have what I would call is feature candidates. They still probably need some validation around on it, but we have some candidates of what we think will be doing that will help achieve that outcome. And as I look farther into the future, I know that there's outcomes that I want to achieve, but I probably even need to validate, are those the right outcomes? Do we fully understand the problem? So I'm not even getting into the solution definition yet. I'm probably looking more into making sure I have a good understanding of the problem area and the whether those are the right areas to focus on.
Yeah, Tom. So Kim also pasted another really helpful webinar, I think run by Ryan and Kenny at the end of last year, where we talked about
Mhm.
how do you ditch the dates and start delivering value. And it's really focused on the concept of a roadmap and a release plan and how those two are very different, even though your stakeholders sometimes confuse the release plan for the roadmap.
Yep.
For those of you who have been talking about the power of outcomes, this really puts it together in a way that I think a lot of people, a lot of your stakeholders will start to understand and will help you say no to certain things that don't drive the outcomes that you have now aligned. Like first, the alignment conversation happens at the top. So
Mhm.
I love what we've done with putting these two together side by side. I think it really
Yeah.
brings
Yeah. If
a
I have the
different
outcome tree and I have this outcome-based roadmap,
Mhm.
boy, that helps you tell a powerful story and get that alignment across the organization. So I mentioned we still need to do some discovery, and there's that high level discovery of, is this a problem that we want to achieve? Are we focusing on the right problem or the right outcome? Is this what is the right feature? But we also need to have this track of uh, well, refining our backlog and our user stories to where they can be included in a sprint. And so when we think about how far ahead we want to be planning on that, ideally you're at least refining requirements 2 to 3 sprints ahead of time. So I don't want to be working on the next sprint now. That should already be refined, but I want to be looking at refining those sprints that are 2 or 3 iterations out is a typically rule of thumb. And why do we want to do that? Because I can spend a lot of time refining requirements or user stories that end up not being worked on because we have some flexibility here, or hopefully we have some flexibility. If I'm not waterfall, then I should have a level of flexibility. And as I move through my sprints, we may make new discoveries from our continuous discovery that changes where our priority may be or how we want to implement a particular feature. And if I've written out all those user stories for that, I'm just throwing that away and having to start from scratch. So that's where I planted this out several sprints ahead of time, I think is ideal for achieving that refinement.
So Tom, what do you say to product managers who are working on just the next sprint? Uh, so like how essentially how do they catch up to this?
Um, that one of the things that I would at least consider is nicely asking for a pause for from the development team. And one of the things that development teams are always looking for, and this is actually something that I ran into a number of years ago, where they needed some time to work on some tech debt. And so when I gave the opportunity to say, hey, I need a pause to get caught up here on some requirements so that we're actually making you productive, they were really happy to leverage some of a sprint or two to be able to do some tech debt work. And so I think as long as you can show that you're going to get some of the valuable things done that you want to while I'm catching up here, because I think if you just try to keep running on the treadmill, you're not going to catch up, and you do have to call an appropriate strategic pause there, and but make sure that you're getting good value at it at the same time.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Well, why don't we, Rena, you're going to share some additional offers
Yeah.
and upcoming webinars. So,
Absolutely. So that was what we wanted to talk about with regards to writing requirements. Again, we're gonna leave it just a few moments here for Q&A. And I have some questions that we hear all the time. So but we want to get to yours first. So first is we've been talking about the importance of discovery practices and empathy interviews. And Tom has been an author, I think, of this Voice of the Customer workbook. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
and something that I think is truly valuable. So we encourage you all to download it. This will be available. This is already available. It has been available on our website. Another great template and resource. Please download that to help you write better requirements. You have to do this work up front.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of if you're just interested in our webinars, we try to make them as actionable, informative as much as possible, and the topics really all come from you. The next one is going to be on the rise of the product operations function. That's going to be led by Ryan Cantwell, another great one of our trainers, and also moderated by Cynthia, who's also part of our Austin crew here at Productside. That one's going to be happening on Wednesday, May
Oops.
21st. No, that's okay. And we try to keep them pretty standard, same time as today. All right, there's the registration. And of course, I've been mentioning it, we do run a number of our classes. Several of them, Tom is actually going to be the instructor on, including the one coming up at the end of this month, May 27th to June 5th. That's a live online, that's a virtual
Hmm.
optimal product management. Of course, he's also going to be teaching the in-person one here in Austin at the Domain, and that one's happening, as we mentioned, June 17th to the 19th. We also have our AI product management class running at the end of June. That will be led by Dean Peters. And so really, it's great for all of you who mentioned that you really are incorporating AI into your daily work, but are also interested in incorporating it into your product. It really covers both of those facets of AI and how AI is changing the game in product management. And we only have just a few more minutes here, so I'm going to just ask some of the ones that we get all the time. And one of them, it it happens a lot. With agile teams, requirements are always changing. So how can a product manager make sure that the requirements don't get stale, that they're updated and they stay relevant, Tom?
Yeah. So a couple things around that, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that don't work too far ahead in refining requirements. And so our goal is I have some requirements that are sitting lower in the backlog that we know that we intend to get to in the future. I don't have to get those too well refined. I need enough there that somebody at least has a sense of the direction and where the work will possibly be done in the future. But I don't want to get overly vested in refining those down to where somebody can actually start developing on that. So wait till you get closer to actually executing on those, and they're up in the backlog and they're actually planned in upcoming sprints, that I would do the work on it. But the second thing, and Dean Peters, one of our colleagues, he says this all the time, is he's going into organizations and they have stuff sitting in their backlog from 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, and we leave them there because we're like, well, someday we may get to it. Well, if someday you actually get, if it becomes valuable enough, somebody will bring it back up. And so, one of the things that will help you is to weed out that backlog, to get rid of stuff that is sitting there and stale. And it takes some discipline to do it, but take some time to clean out the backlog with things that we've been talking about for years but never gotten to, and make sure that what you have in there are fresh based upon the discovery work that we've been talking about doing.
Yeah, I remember he likes to use that time around the holidays at the end of the year to clear that out and start fresh in the new year.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right, Tom. Well, here's another one, and this one I've heard myself. I've talked to product leaders and CTOs and a C-suite where they think that the requirement is just obvious. It's a feature that we need, and we know we need it because look at our competition; they have it, right?
Hmm.
Something like that. So, what do you do in that case where a stakeholder, and often very senior one, is pushing for a requirement without any true context or understanding of the value?
Yeah, I just finished up a, training class earlier that was doing virtually, and one of the examples we came up was around that. And one of the things that they don't always reflect on is they may see what the competitor is doing, but they're not looking at how have we positioned our product in the marketplace. So I think the first thing is to remind them around what our strategy is, how we're competing, how we're winning in the market, and if we're actually winning with that, we may be able to say what the competitor's doing is not part of our winning strategy. Because if all I'm doing is creating a product that looks like the competitors, what's my competitive advantage? Why should anyone buy my product? So we want to make sure that we're not just following competitors, but we're focused on what our product stands for. And then I think the second part of that is that a valuable outcome for the customer? Yes, we may be putting that feature in, but is that really a most valuable outcome for our target customer base that we're reaching out to? So I think having conversations that bring us back to our strategy and this customer understanding is the best way to get there.
Wonderful, Tom. And I think we've gone over all of the tools that all product managers should be using to have these kinds of conversations, to handle those difficult discussions, whether it's a C-suite member, a product leader, or a peer. We hope you are armed today with the tools to write better requirements that really drive business outcomes. Big thank you to Tom Evans for a wonderful presentation. I hope everybody here joins us on May 21st for the Rise of Product Ups function. And thank you all for your time. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.